Let's have a good time.
A lot of people would say over in the early days, I guess, when I was driving the Bud 8 car, that me and you were great drafting partners. We worked together quite a bit. Why do you think people said that?
Well, the stats show it, first of all. I mean, that's the easiest part. But, and I was telling somebody yesterday while we were at Daytona that, I had Bobby Labonte as a teammate at the time. And, like what we're seeing in the era in NASCAR now where the manufacturer, all the teams under a manufacturer umbrella are starting to work together. So all the Ford teams are working together. And then actually we saw a new era start yesterday where there's such a small amount of Chevy teams and Toyota teams that they don't have the physical numbers of the Ford teams to team up. So Hendrick and Gibbs teamed up yesterday. And it's just showing how the sport's evolving, because it's no secret that Chevrolet absolutely hates Toyota. But here you got Chevy teams and Toyota teams working together because they know that this is the direction that they have to go after what we saw at Talladega last year. Right. So it's just the evolution of the sport. So I was telling somebody yesterday about that, and my teammate was Bobby Labonte, and they tried to get us to work together, but the problem was Bobby was the one that and I kind of looked at him weird when he said it, and I took it personal, but he goes, our ideas are different about how to do this. And he had an idea how to run the restrictor plate stuff, and I had a different idea. Well, your idea how to do it and my idea were exactly in line. And it just, literally it was one race that we got together, and he knew that, and it worked a couple times, but we were always a lot more aggressive than everybody else was with what we thought and where to go and when to go and why to go. But once he went, and he knew that when he went that I was going to go with him, that pattern, that's the way we ran the entire race, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter if we were going through 3 wide. It didn't matter if he went to the damn concession stand. I was whatever he ordered, I was going to order behind him, and that's the way we ran that whole race. And then after that, any time that we were together, and it didn't matter what the order was, we knew that if we got together, that we had somebody that was going to go with us, and knew that when we did something, why we were doing it, and so we were on the same page and in sync that way. And that's something that Bobby and I couldn't get hooked up that way and couldn't get in the same mindset. But everybody goes, well, why would you do that? Well, we're still racing for points,
right?
And you still want to win, but there's so many variables that can keep you from winning a restrictor plate race. And to me, my mindset was, I've got a guy that I know races and runs this type of racing the way I like to run it. So even if I follow him and I push him to the win, I still get second place points. I still get second place money. I'm giving myself the best opportunity to get in the top 2. Even if it's not the win, I'm still getting the best finish I can get out of it. And that's what we did. It got to the point to where they tried everything they could to separate us. Right. Guys would intentionally try to get us broke apart.
Teammates.
Yeah.
Like actual teammates. It was always funny because we had Jeff Gordon in here, and we asked him, you and Dale didn't really draft together very much. Y'all didn't really like each other when it came to plate racing, and it was a complete different philosophy. Yeah. He said he called it to philosophy. They just 2 different game plans, and neither one of you really strike me as the kind of people that want to be told what the rules to racing are, but before the race actually happens. I think you want to write them yourself, and do it your own way. And I don't think the teammate thing was always jiving with either of you, right?
Yeah, I hated teammates at plate tracks. I just hated a responsibility to anyone. But there are people, and Tony was one of them. I can't even count them on one hand that you go out on the racetrack with in a plate race, and you see them do something. You go, "That's exactly what I would have done, and that's exactly what I want to do." And everything that he did, I'm like, "Yep, I was right there with you in the train of thought." And it seemed like it was just come so natural when we would find each other at Talladega and Daytona. It's like, oh, hell, here we go, because they ain't going to be able to stop this. And it worked really good for a while. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
That 2004 race, when you won your first Daytona 500, you and Tony were just, that was a race between 2 people, I felt.
Yeah.
And
I have a question that
about that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I've always wanted to ask this question. So I passed you down the back straightaway, and you didn't side draft me.
I don't even remember it. I'd have to see it. I'll be
Really?
honest. I'd have to see it to remember this.
I've always wondered. So we're going down the back straightaway, and I side drafted you, and had this momentum, but it was slow, and it's a slow process of sort of going by you to try to get clear. And I was just like waiting for you to.
Who was behind me?
Kurt was 4 or 5 car lengths behind us.
Yeah.
But it was otherwise it was just
nose
me
to
and
tail.
you.
It was just you two.
Yeah.
With
I'd have to watch it. I mean,
15 to go
it's a
or
good
so?
question, but I have to look at it.
That's
to,
shit.
to
If
fi-
I
to
if I
remember
run
that.
first or second, or if I in a race like that, I'd never be able to forget it. Like I would. It's interesting that like I can't lose those memories, or especially the ones I lose, especially the race.
There's 2 Daytona 500s that absolutely stand out in my mind that I know I screwed up,
Yeah.
or at least felt like I screwed up. And this is such a rookie mistake, and I wasn't even a rookie, and I can't remember what year it was, but I know I was leading the race. Jeff Gordon was second. That's when we still had the lead cars on the outside lane and lap down cars on the inside. But by this time, there's nobody left a lap down. Everybody's all in the lead lap. And I remember sticking my hand out the window, and when I got on the gas, waving him to go, and he just sat there and waited for about a second. And by that time, I'm about 8 car lengths out. I'm like, man, I just did the dumbest. And I already knew 100 yards past the start-finish line what was going to happen. And you have to sit there for about 5 to 10 more seconds and wait for your fate to get sealed here. And I saw it. I'm like, man, I was so nervous because I was like, I'm in a spot where I could win this race, and I didn't even think about what I had set myself up for, which was absolute disaster there. And the other one was when Ryan Newman went by me, when him and Kurt Busch were lined up together as teammates with Penske,
Yes.
and myself and Kyle Busch were lined up. And I remember seeing him coming, and I'm like, don't leave your teammate, don't leave your teammate, don't leave your teammate, don't leave your teammate. And I thought if I get up there, the speed that they were running, I thought if I tried to get up there, I was probably gonna get wrecked anyway.
Right.
But I sat there and I'm like, when it doesn't work out for you, you're like, I'd rather get at least tried and got wrecked, knowing I wasn't going to win it down. If I'd have known I wasn't going to win it down here, I'd at least tried it up there.
Yeah.
But those are 2 that absolutely just, I cannot get it out of my head.
Really, even
Yeah.
today. Any other races like that? Any other things in racing, or any regrets like that sort of bother you today?
Well, it depends on what day it is.
Yeah.
It depends on where we're at. I mean, there's dirt races where, I lost 2 races last year in the sprint car on the last corner of the last lap. And this was at the same track, and the guy that beat me was the same guy both nights. And it was 2 different set of circumstances. And the second time it happened, I'm like, I'm guarding against this. This is what happened to me on the last lap. And he just totally did something different. But both of them, lap cars that got involved and broke our momentum, which that's, like I said, in a wing sprint car, it's a huge deal, is that airspeed and momentum.
Yeah.
And you sit there and you get back there and your crew chief won't even look at you. And it's like you feel like such a failure when you do that.
When somebody says raw talent, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think there's guys that have raw talent, and I'll come back to it. Then there's taught talent. You can sit there and you can watch videos, you can study, you can talk to people. Raw talent are guys that don't have to think about what they do. They just get in and do it. It's not taught. It's just that's what they do. They get in and they do it.
We talked about some drivers last week on the show that I thought had raw talent. What driver out there do you think has the most raw ability?
In Cup right now, to me, it's still Kyle Larson.
Yeah, I figured you would.
I think Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell, and I'm not picking them because they're dirt track guys by any means, but you look at what Kyle does in a car. He overdrives everything he does, but he can still make it work. There's times he's got that thing sideways and saves it, and it's like there's not a lot of guys that could save it and push it that hard for that long and not make that mistake. And he still makes a mistake every now and then, but I've watched him when he was open wheel cars before he got there, and he's like playing video games, and he just puts his phone down, gets in a car, and goes and races. He doesn't think about what he does. He just gets in and does it.
Yeah.
And there's just there's a handful of guys that fit in that kind of category. There's just not a lot of guys that, Robbie Gordon was one that you and I both got to race with. Robbie had a lot of raw talent.
Yeah.
Now it was rough around the edges raw talent, but you could put Robbie in anything and he could get 90, 95% of the way there like that.
Yeah.
And there's just not a lot of guys that can do that. And I think everybody has an amount of raw talent, but there's just a handful of guys that I think that just truly are pure raw talented drivers.
Hey, Tony, I got a quick question for you. Going back to Daytona, you guys, the results notwithstanding, I'm talking more in general. I got a theory that Dale Jr. as an owner doesn't particularly like watching restrictor plate races because it's just the weight of the wallet. You just hear that cash register seems like to go in. And Junior Motorsports does pretty good. Won a race. Do you enjoy watching restrictor plate races as an owner?
I didn't even like, and as bad as it is, I mean, as many races as we won at Daytona, I didn't like even being in them, let alone watching them. Because, like you said, and while you were starting that question, I'm sitting there going, ching, 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 ching.
Especially this week.
Oh, yeah. And then I saw a stat last night. We were watching the basketball game, the All-Star game last night, and there was a thing across the bottom. It said 3 drivers out of the whole race weren't involved in a wreck at some point during the race yesterday. Jeez. 37 out of 40 cars were involved in a wreck at some point at the Daytona 500.
That's crazy.
And it's like, you sit there and you just shake your head.
It's hard to look forward to, I would imagine, if I have this investment and you're taking, basically half your fleet to one race for a week, and then you go, and then it's just like you just know that they're coming, and you just hope to. It's no way to live.
We're sitting there on the red flag, and Mike Bogaravich, that's the crew chief on the 14 car, we're sitting there, and he was talking about when we won with Kurt. This is during the red. I mean, with I don't know how many laps to go. And Zippy's sitting to the left of me, and he's like, yeah, he goes, you crashed 3 cars. He goes, but it made up for it when Kurt won. I just started laughing. I'm like, you obviously don't work upstairs where the finances are. Because with all 3 of those cars, what we won at the Daytona 500 didn't even pay for those 3 cars.
Wow.
So it's a losing proposition when you go to Daytona. You are not going to make a dime. You're going to spend a bunch of money to go down there and tear a bunch of stuff up.
Did I assume incorrectly, or am I right? My theory that you don't particularly enjoy watching those restrictor plate races.
Depends on what position you're in.
I actually do.
I don't know that it does with him.
I actually do enjoy watching them. I didn't when I first became an owner. I didn't, and we did. We tore up all our cars down there one year, and it was like a tenth of our budget spent in one race. And but I don't know. I kind of have loosened up over time.
Okay. You don't look it.
Yeah. I mean, we
you
did
feel
win the
like
race.
You've pulled a pin on a grenade.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. As soon as they drop the green flag the first time, you feel like you've pulled a pin out of a grenade and you're just waiting on it to go off at some point.
I think I'd be a bad person to ask because we did end up winning. So you wouldn't own up to specifics on your physical altercations. Would you own up to ever having a cheat on your car, cheating in racing?
Everybody in racing is cheating.
I know that. Yeah. Do you have any stories of cheating? Like, so for example, I'll give you one of mine. So I put some trick fuel in my car and went to Myrtle Beach and burnt the motor up as soon as I cranked it. So I drove 4 hours to Myrtle Beach and burnt the piston out of the #1 piston cylinder and drove home because I didn't mix the fuel.
Yeah.
I went right to the bottom of the fuel cell.
Oh, God, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm going to tell my dad because I didn't even know this. I was a kid. But, when I raced go-karts, the carburetor was a 1-inch carburetor. Mm-hmm. So we ran restrictor plates in the class that I had to run, and it was a 600 thousandths restrictor plate. Well, there was a spacer block in between that and the actual motor. And so what my dad had done is had somebody make a 600 thousandths hole in that plastic block, but it put a taper on it, like a cone.
Yeah.
And one week he ran it on one side of the plate, and the other week he ran on the other side of the plate. And, I mean, it obviously helped it a little bit, but we ran, and then he did it 2 weeks in a row, and he took it off and never ran it again. But I like telling on my dad because my dad's 80 years old, and it's like role reversal now. Yeah. I'm being the parent, and he's the kid now. But yeah, I know there were times that things were that's the job of all of us in racing. I mean, that's been the history of racing, is taking the rules that the sanctioning body gives you and trying to read between the lines. And anytime there's an opportunity for interpretation, you are always going to take that opportunity.
Absolutely. So. Being a track owner, you can appreciate this. In one of the last late model races I ran down at Myrtle Beach, I told the head inspector that I didn't have much speed, so he brought me a plate to use for my carburetor. And it was so gnarly, I was scared to put it on my car.
Looked like a beaver chewed on the inside of it.
It was pretty bad.
I have a favorite one of yours.
What's that?
I won't say what racetrack it was. Might have been a restrictor plate. But I remember Tony Jr. coming in and going, "You want to win this race? I mean, do you really want to win this race? How much do you want to win this race?" and it was his like code. I don't even know if you remember that, but you're like, "Yeah, I want to win it. I want to win it." You're like, "You don't matter what happens in the week. You want to win it? I want to win it. All right. Well, then we're gonna win it."
That's funny.
Let's have a good time.